So, I have to thank you, Al.
Yeah.
The energy and sequence of events that started with our conversation after half a year of knowing each other, and you know, watching, my memory is you watching some music on YouTube and me asking, what are you watching? And you said music, and I said, check out my channel, and instead you whipped out your phone and said, I was in a band.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the energy of the post of that picture and the not only music commentary but the social commentary that came out of it was mind-blowing. And you started a new chapter in my life. You know, after many years of working in the business and now not doing it, I finally have the time, energy, and support to do what I love. So you really, really, really were the germinating seed of it, so I have to thank you.
Sure. Set you off on another phase.
You did, and it made me realize everybody's got a story to tell.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you're talking to, which of the guys that, you know, where you work, they all have something to tell.
Yeah.
And we can all learn from each other and life's lessons, and I'm jealous of you. You were born and came of age in the era that I always wanted to. And,
My daughter says the same thing.
I always said, I wish I was 10 years older. I wish I was 10 years older. So I'd love to hear your tale of how music came into your life, what you did with it, and where it took you and what it showed you.
Okay. I started playing piano and tuba when I was 7 years old. So that's primarily what I played. And my dad wanted me to play in the square dance polka band, but I wasn't interested. About the time Beatles came out, '64, Chip had his first starting band. And it was him and John Burrus and J.C. Hoskin, maybe one other. And they were playing a local gig on Sugar Boulevard, a garage party. And so I showed up and I said, oh, well, I see you don't have a bass player, you need a bass player. Oh, you can play bass? Oh, yeah, I play tuba and piano and all that. I'd never picked up a bass guitar. So I ran out to a store and rented an amplifier, or rented a guitar and bought an amplifier, cheap stuff. And showed up the gig. It was a garage party, kind of an after football game garage party. And he said, okay, we're going to do Louie. I said, okay, what key in? Like I knew what I was doing. I said, oh, it's in A. I was like, okay, where's A? Oh, well, it's standard progression. Oh, what's standard progression? I knew nothing. And I just faked it. Those songs, you know, Shout and Louie, and they were easy songs, you know, 2-3 chords at the most. So I BS'd my way through the thing. And I think they finally figured out I didn't know how to play anything, but I had to go home and learn it quick. Because, you know, they needed a bass player and they were willing to pick me up.
So what'd you do, play along with the radio, or how'd you learn?
Played along with the radio, played along with records, anything I could listen to. Fortunately, I had the piano background, so I knew scales, I knew how to read music, and the tuba background, which gave me the low end. So I knew how to, you know, I had a basic music background. And so it was just like cram fast. And the rest, you know, it worked out. So I think our big break as the band, the Disciples, was at 1964 talent show on a high school stage. And I sent you that picture.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of our coming out. And just, you know, took off after that. Then it was garage parties and after the game sock hops and all that kind of stuff. And it's built on that. Chip and I were talking in 1965, 1966. We were doing 2 to 3 gigs a week. Nobody was playing that kind of schedules, and considering we were in high school. So, I mean, it just became popular.
When you talk about the sock hops and the culture, you had the teen club culture, which doesn't exist now. You know, they had to provide a place for the market of, you know, post-Beatles invasion kind of music. You talk about, you know, how did those operate, what time? I mean, obviously Chesterland, Hullabaloo, and the Menor one, and, you know, tell me what that scene was like. And
Well, in our case, it was, talk about garage bands. We were like original garage band. We rehearsed in garages. We played beer parties and after game parties in garages. Or we did, I guess you'd call them sock hops, in a high school gymnasium.
okay.
And we did a lot of after prom parties, just all over. I mean, we were Orange, Chagrin, Beachwood, that kind of stuff. And it was, you know, we had a huge repertoire of music. I should send you our song list sometime. You know, you just wouldn't believe it. Anywhere from James Brown to the Paul Revere Raiders and the Beatles, and it just, you know, Smokey Robinson. It went on and on and on. So it just, you know, it just exploded, became more popular and more popular. Probably the biggest gig that we probably did is in, I think, 1966, and I sent you the pictures from Landwood Plaza.
Right.
And we set up across the street from the parking lot, sidewalk in front of the jewelry store, and just started playing. And word got around. 700, 800 people showed up from everywhere from eating brush, and the police had to shut down Pine Tree in front of, you know, Heinen's in there, because they just blocked the whole thing because there were so many people. So, and a couple of years ago now, Heinen's, that ownership of that plaza rather, invited us to play their 50th anniversary and set up in the parking lot. So here we all showed up and played this gig, and cops were there and a lot of local people were there, and yeah, it was fun.
How many old faces would you guess 50 years later?
Oh, a lot of old faces. I don't even recognize a lot of them. Yeah, so then the last couple of years, we got, of course, Chip's been playing all over Europe and blues clubs and all that kind of stuff. But we started playing the 50th high school reunions, where these people we played for in high school going, "Oh, you guys are too loud." Well, we weren't, you know, too loud then. But I mean, we were involved in Geneva and Lake riots. We started that.
Tell me about that. I'm not familiar.
Well, a bunch of Orange High School, I think football players, some athletes went and rented a house in Geneva and Lake. We were invited up to the play. We were loud. So all the local Tommy stars showed up. And our people were like, "No, you can't come in." Well, then they started swinging 2x4s and beer bottles and that. Like, "We're out of here." And we left because we didn't want our equipment smashed up. And that's when the National Guard came in and they burned down the town, and the whole thing was...
What year, when was that? Do you know?
I think that was probably in 1965, 66, right? Everything kind of took place those 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Why did things end in 66?
Well, a couple of us decided to go away to college, including me. And it just, you know, it was just the end of the era. And it was, some people want to keep playing, some people got to go to school, and just everybody went every which way direction. And then society dropped us in a bombshell on, you know, Kent State and the Vietnam War and all that, and everything just kind of flew apart. But when I left, they needed another bass player. And so Chip Fitzgerald brought in Dale Peters and Donnie Baker, Richie Shacks, all these people, and they formed the band CASE E.T. Hooley, which is probably the best band that's ever come out of Cleveland. Like, those guys were really, really good. Todd Sharp was in there. They had an area in Cedar Lee area, Chagrin, in Cleveland Heights. Dick Lurie's guitar studio, there was another one there. And they call themselves the Cleveland Heights Mafia. And they were all, that's where Todd Sharp and Dale Peters and Donnie Baker, all these people hung around in these guitar shops. And, you know, it just became like right that Cedar Lee area. Cedar Taylor's Peabody's bar there, and they became, that was central focus. That became Yeah, and then Dale Peters went with the James Gang. Todd Sharp went on. He was playing with
Stevie Nicks
Stevie
and
Nicks and all those kind of people.
Yeah.
And when Butch Armstrong was 10 years old and his brother Vito was 8 years old, was when they'd sneak into orange sock hops to see us play. And they actually hung underneath an old guy's coat so they could sneak in. And that was Ted Cohen, and I think he became something big with recording. And his brother Ron, I think he was like a marketing manager for Metallica or something like that. I mean, everything just took off of people that came out of Orange.
And Cleveland in general too, but the Orange, the more names you throw out about Orange, and I loved Stutz Bearcat's response to that original post off your picture, and you alluded to me the rivalry of the greasers and rockers and all that. I'd love to hear because back then Orange was country. Chagrin was the next quote old big city, and it was developed and super old, whereas Orange I think was more far rural area.
Yeah, but there's a really stratified social financial structure society in Orange School District. You had the greasers come out of Orange, and race car drivers and greasy hair. You had extremely wealthy people that came out like Daisy Hill Estates and Gates Mills, that kind of stuff. And you had us kind of like nerd kind of students and scientific students. We had some classmates that got on, PhDs and microbiologies and things like that. I mean, so it was a very stratified or separated social structure in Orange. So, I mean, I sat next to a guy at home for 4 years. O'Brien partner, right next to each other. I never knew he played bass guitar in a greaser band.
Wow.
Because those social structures didn't mix. At least as far as I was concerned.
Did like the rise of the second wave of youth culture, like the hippie movement and the psychedelic thing, did that change that at all?
Well, then I was at Kent State. I left Orange by the time that all started happening.
Well, that was like 67, wasn't it, when the hippies happened? Kent State was like 3
Well,
years
it kind of moved, started California, moved in here. That's when Glenn Schwartz was out California, formed Pacific Gas and Electric after he left the James Gang. And then it graduated towards Kent. And Kent State was just the perfect place for that.
Why?
Because it's a wild beer drinking town. And you had bars there, James Gang was playing there, and a lot of that whole string of bars down there, the Cove and JB's and the Loft. And it just seemed like that's where they decided to hit. So,
tell me about the Kent State culture. I mean, was it, you've got more than just James Gang and the Measles before that. You got Numbers Band. What else was happening down there musically or culturally?
That was pretty much it. There was another band down there called the Brambles. I hung around with them. I hung around with Joe Walson's James Gang. And I go to the bar and they were cutting their first album. I say, "Hey Joe, how did you play that?" So he'd hand me that 59 Les Paul. I said, "You're going to play it." He'd show me some of the riffs off the first album. But you could go down there for 50 cents to see the band. It was just it was a big music scene. And those are the bands that I can really think of. I mean, there was a lot of startup people and hangers-on. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had a lot of those in Orange. So,
what to you was the most significant musical moment that you experienced not playing and playing? Two different ones there.
I think the thing that really got me turned on is I went to that 1965 or 66 Beatles concert at Public Hall and sat in a sixth row of the orchestra pit right down in front. So that was significant to me. Just being that close to a band like the Beatles, because you just knew what they were how big they are. After that, I went in other concerts. I went and saw Hendrix. I saw Cream, because they were all coming through the Cleveland area, and I just went and saw them all.
So was that with the Monkees, the Hendrix show, or
No, there was no, the Monkees weren't there. It was just Hendrix.
Okay, because he opened.
And I think
for
I
the
saw
Monkees.
that was Akron Civic Theater.
Okay.
I saw that one at. And I mean, they come out on stage, and I saw Jefferson snare playing, and Jack Cassidy comes out there with a home-built guitar and those amplifiers, and he comes out and hits a low A, and it's like I'm sitting in the back of the place, and you could feel air movement because of the whole wall of amplifiers. And so you see these incredible musicians doing things. What I thought was, because I didn't have the musical talent to do it, what I was in high school, I played in orchestra. I played stand-up bass, fiddle in the orchestra, and the marching band, and the concert band, and the rock band. And I was thinking, boy, would it be neat to come up with kind of a combination band orchestra that included the rock stuff and the classical stuff. And it was in my head that I just didn't have the time and the musical ability to do that. And what do you know, years later we got Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I heard the first time, and I saw that, and the first time I said, that's what it's supposed to be about, putting them together like that.
You'd have to call some prog rock building to that point.
Oh yeah.
And some of it's so constructed, it almost is.
But, I mean, at that time, there was Kent State, and then I went to Ohio State, and I was trying to study, get the first job, and my dad was sheltering me from everything. So yeah, I kind of dropped out of the music scene for a long time. Got involved in some other activities that took my time, and trying to work on projects around town here. And I hooked up with landscape architect, and we did Four Seasons in Landerwood and Aurora Shores and Walden and Hamlet Hills, and so I was doing that kind of design stuff. And it was all before computers, so it was all hand drawn.
So you touched on the Beatles show at Public Auditorium. I believe that was the one where George Harrison was ordered off stage by the chief of police. Do you remember anything about that?
I don't remember it, but I just remember all the crowds rushing the stage right over the top of us. I don't know if that was the one where he was ordered off stage. I
think they only played here twice, once at Public Hall and once at the stadium in '66. So I think it was '64 and '66 when they played here. And obviously the vast difference of playing in the stadium. I don't think you could hear the music too well at either venue, but I would venture to say you had a better chance at it at Public Hall.
There was one period just a few years ago, I saw down in Public Auditorium, I saw Rush, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and I saw Eric Clapton. Almost in the same month and a half. I couldn't hear for 2 months. Because between Rush and Trans-Siberian Orchestra, that's loud stuff. And our band, we used to see what we could do. We broke the bulbs in the chandelier out of pure sound. Oh, let's see if we can do better than that. Put some beer bottles out in front of the amplifiers, played so loud it shattered the beer bottles. I mean, we played a gig at Chagrin Falls, and the police came and said, we're getting complaints, because it's a valley, we're getting complaints from 5 miles down through the valley. You got to turn it down.
Wow.
So, I mean, then it was how much noise could you make? We got kicked out of Beaumont because they thought we were like animals. And we weren't really. I mean, they were a lot heavier. Well, it was before hardcore bands. I mean,
before loud music.
Yeah.
Or metal or heavy.
Like I'm saying, we're playing Louie, Twisted Shout, and Paul Revere and the Raiders and Kinks, and we only have one original song that one of our guys wrote.
What was that?
The guy J.C. Hoskin was in the pictures. He was right after he wrote it, he got killed in Cambodia. But he wrote a song called Drag Strip because Chip was a drag car driver. And he actually never saw that song performed. So, but every time we play a gig now, we start out, that's our first kind of a tune-up song.
Getting back to Disciples, one of the most interesting things that came out, from this energy was that you guys were like the first interracial band.
Yeah.
Talk about that a bit, because Cleveland obviously had riots in '68, and you know, describe that climate and attitude that people had and what was going on.
Well, we formed out of school. Chip and I were in a marching band together. He played drums. So that was that. And there were some guitar players in there. And the sax player, his dad played in a big band, sax. So he came in, joined the thing. And actually, I forgot where the question's going, but...
About interracial.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well, yeah. And we really didn't think about it. I mean, Chip is part black. He didn't know about the Huff riots. None of us knew about it, really, that it was going on, because that's downtown. We're out in the burbs. So we didn't think about it. And there were, the black district in Orange was on in Woodmere along Sugar Boulevard. And that's where he grew up. And a lot of, it's like the Sugar Park district.
Yeah.
And, but we didn't think about it. I mean, Chip was in gymnastics and track and football and playing drums and all that. He's a hell of a drummer. And so we picked that up. We had the Jewish guy as our drummer. And we just didn't think about it. We came together for that reason. We just didn't affect us, I guess.
Right. What about people outside? Was it more divisive or less divisive then? Or, I mean, was there a mood of people thinking about that?
Some places we went were, well, this is a black guy or there's a Jewish guy that were outside of Orange. They sometimes would raise a question about it, but it just didn't bother us.
No overt racism or issues?
Not really overt, no.
Yeah.
If anything showed up, it was just, brushed aside. And it just come up with us.
You brought up the...
But yes, we were probably the most, the first interreligious kind of band.
You brought up the, what was it, the Cleveland Heights Mafia?
Yeah.
Someone earlier today talked to me about the Guitar Mafia based out of a downtown music store where everyone got...
That's what I'm talking about.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. The Cedar area, it was Dick Lurie's, was on Cedar, and was it D'Angelo? Billboard Durango's was on Lee Road, just north of that. And it was those two guitar shops. And yeah, it was the Music Mafia, and that was all these people. It was Donnie Baker, who still lives in the Heights, plays in Mayfield Music. Todd Sharp, who was on Cleveland Heights. When I first met him in the CASE E.T. Hooley, he was 15 years old. He wasn't even supposed to go into bars. But he was the most amazing guitar player you ever saw. And his dad was a professional guitarist, so he just natural ability. And like I say, the last time I talked to him on the phone, because he lives in Nashville, he's got his own brand of amplifiers. And he's in the phone books. I go, hey, how you doing? Oh yeah, I said, Chip said to say hi, and he kind of knew who I was and memory and all that. He says, well, I gotta go now. It's 4th of July, we're gonna play a concert. That's okay. So I asked the in-law, I said, we're in Nashville, what's the big gig going on? Oh, the in-law says, well, where can we see him? Is there a bar he's playing at? I said, no, Todd Sharp doesn't play bars. This is a guy who played with, Chris McVie and Fleetwood Mac and Rod Stewart and Paul McCartney. No, he didn't play bars. So I asked her, I said, what's the biggest concert in Nashville that night? He said, well, that's a Chesney concert. I said, that's where he's playing. And he was. So.
You described to me that Hooley was the best band out of Cleveland ever. Tell me about their scene, their sound, what made them get that acclaim from your perspective?
They were good. I mean, Richie Shacks and Donnie Baker were the best. Chip was the best. Dale Peters was in there. Dale Peters was a drummer before he was a bass player.
Wow.
So he had a knack for percussion, for the beat. and they were just amazing. And they would tackle Yardbirds and Hendrix and those kind of really hard stuff that nobody could tackle because they were just that good.
That good a player.
Yeah.
Were they also original? I mean, didn't they get signed? Weren't they signed to a label, or did they never
I don't
get signed?
think they ever got signed to the label.
Okay.
And there was, I called E.T. Hooley 1 and E.T. Hooley 2. And the E.T. Hooley 2 was the one where Todd Sharp came in. And they played the Viking Saloon downtown and, you know, a whole lot of other places. They were just extremely talented. And they just, you know, the guys could play the hardest stuff. It's like Butch Armstrong. I mean, he sits there and play Hendrix and he'll play Walsh better than Hendrix and Walsh. And that's the way Richie Shacks and Donnie Baker were. And Chip had a background in drums as well. He'd sit down one time, sometimes with the Disciples, and he'd sit down and play drums. Well, we'd have to sit on the bass drum and nail it to the floor to keep it from moving so he hit the pedal so hard. And one time he drove that pedal right through the drum head.
Wow.
Because the guys, at that time, he was a wrestler and all, he's a really powerful guy, gymnastics. I saw him do it. He's still the only guy at Orange who did an iron cross on the rings, you know what that is?
Yeah.
And then lifted himself back up out of it.
Wow.
And we're like, holy smokes.
Wow.
So, I mean, he's that strong.
They don't let kids do that in gym
And he's a
anymore
street
until
guy.
get hurt.
Oh, when I was at Kent State, we had to take gym classes. We had a rope climb all the way to the ceiling of the gymnasium with just some black foam pads at the bottom. They don't allow that anymore. I beat 150 kids up there because I went hands only, no feet. I played guitar,
You got strong hands.
and martial arts, and so strong hands. They don't allow kids to climb all over the ceiling anymore.
Yeah, the wussification of America. You mentioned the Viking Saloon, and to me that's a really intriguing place because it is looked at as one of the birthplaces of punk. It's where Perubu, predecessor band played.
Before that, it was like E.T. Hooley, and it was...
Please, and I want to get a feel of what the place was like. Wasn't it in a hotel?
Somewhere downtown, I don't remember, like
Okay.
Payne Avenue or Lakeside or somewhere down there. It was kind of another version of the Euclid Tavern.
Okay.
That's why I look at it. And the only reason I go there is because E.T. Hooley was playing.
Where else did they play? What other venues were in their regular schedule?
Oh, I don't even remember. I was going to say I was at Kent State and I just came back into town. And
Here and there.
I mean, Chip might have mentioned to you, we played the Sugar Army got Bobby Goldsboro and the Cannibal Henners. And Bobby Goldsboro confronted me at the door. Hi, I'm Bobby Goldsboro. I said, well, I'm Al Parker from the Disciples. So don't shove your stuff at me. I'll shove it. And the union found out we were non-union, so they unplugged us. Well, the people at that gig didn't come there to see Bobby Goldsboro and Cannibal Henners. They came to see us. So we left and took the crowd with us to another place. And,
Yeah, the Here Come the Brides crowd wasn't that strong.
well, we did Jerry G show with Mitch Ryder. Mitch Ryder was a hell of a drummer.
When Jerry G show, tell me about that.
I would love to be able to get a videotape. I don't know if they kept tapes in those days or if it was spring of 1966. How we got on the show, I don't remember. Oh, they were featuring, each week they would feature different high schools. And one week they were going to feature Orange. So there we were. And we played Kansas City, which is still our opening song to this day. And we'd hang around backstage with Rich Ryder. He'd sit down and play the drums, and a little guy. And I know we played with, I don't think they never aired it. We played at the Big Five show, but they never aired us playing. And there were Battle of the Bands. We played a Battle of Bands with the Mods. Became the choir, on and on. And we had little tiny amplifiers, old Ampeg amps and home built stuff. And Dave Burke wanted to let me play out of his dual Showman. And the other band, our band, no, you can't do that because you're just going to overpower the whole band. And I wish I had that guitar. It was an old Gibson EBO, 64 Gibson EBO. Wish I still had that guitar. A lot of us wish we still had our old guitars.
You know, it's amazing the stuff that becomes valuable that overnight or almost.
Oh, we have a guy that he sat in with us for a couple of gigs recently for the 50-year stuff. He has a 1963 Gibson 335, and it's in mint condition.
50 grand.
Oh, I can't imagine. We had a guy show, and he's in his pictures with the guitars in one of those photographs. We were going to have our first get-together gig, a private party, in 1999. We were having a jam at my house, and he just showed up. He says, "Hey guys, hey, how you doing, Bob?" He says, "Can I play?" Yeah. So he opened up the guitar case, and there's a Fender Telecaster in there with the original factory strings, the tag's still on it.
Wow.
They've been sitting in his attic for 30, 40 years. You know, you can imagine what that could. And he's going, "Well, what do you think it's worth?" He goes, "No," he was thinking, "Oh, 400, 500 nuts." No, 4,000 or 5,000 minimum. You got the tags, you got the factory strings, and he couldn't remember how to tune it. Chip picked it up, it was still in tune after all those years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, when we played on Jerry Shoe's show, that was black and white.
What channel was that on? That Jerry?
Channel 3.
Channel 3.
WKYC, I can't remember what it was called back then. They had different call signals.
Yeah.
Not WHK, it was KYW.
Yeah.
WKYC. And out of that gig, we ended up playing I can't remember, it was a bachelor party or wedding reception for the WKYC disc jockeys, and we played in Winton Place. So that's when mods were beginning, the mod invasion from out of England and all that. We were adjusting plastic clothes and all that stuff. We couldn't afford that stuff. So we got out there in the party, so Chris Butler and I decided to fake British accents and gave ourselves British names. And he called himself Ian Stewart, and I called my name Sydney Littlefield, which is actually a flower variety for carnations. And I said, "Ooh, that sounds English." Obviously, they Littlefield. And we had to believe in it. They took us down to their different apartments and went to the place, giving us beer and all that kind of stuff.
What's your greatest personal, youthful moment of that's so amazing? I'll never forget that. What blew you away as a kid in retrospect?
Oh, I can't remember. I still think it was just seeing the Beatles, and Hendrix, that kind of stuff, that period right in there. I was starting to get into it, but when I saw those gigs, I said, "That's what I got to do." And I sat down with a famous black guitarist years later and just started jamming. And I was playing one of the Crosby, Stills, Nash rhythm sections. And then he picked that up and I started playing lead to it. And I actually recorded the whole thing for myself when I wrote my own song. And I got 2 songs I wrote, and I named one of them after my daughter. And but I mean, the guys were on a beer drinking thing in North Carolina. Go to the beach. He and I are playing. Leave us alone. We got a thing going here. And I think you probably heard the phrase "magic moment."
Sure.
That we had one of those. And when you could never play any better, you'll never play better again. Because it's just one of those magic moments that happens. That was one of those. And like I say, I wrote a song. I got it on cassette tape.
I'd love to have you come over again and play your songs, and we can work them into something if you're up for that. Always an option.